Alex King. He is one of the young men accused of actually brutally beating or helping to beat his father to death. Although this is not his trial, this is the trial of Mr. Chavis, the adult co-defendant, who is having a separate proceeding.
You both have decided to share your story in such a public manner right now.
Given how we last left off in the eyes of the public, we just felt they deserved more, a follow-up to know that all of their faith and their hope and goodwill weren't wasted on us.
What would you say to the people who say, once a murderer, always a murderer?
To be fair to those people, we did make a mistake. However, there are a select few individuals who decide to have faith and just blindly hope in something. Catherine Medico, who I now call Mother, is a prime example of that, inviting both of us into her family. And we just want to show by living our lives as productive citizens that that's not a mistake.
A house fire call in Cantonment in 2001 unexpectedly led firefighters to a gruesome crime scene that made headlines across the United States. What they discovered, covered in soot from the fire, was the battered body of a 40-year-old man who lived with his two children, aged 12 and 13 at the time. Curiously, the children's bodies were not found at the scene. This relieved the fire department and police, as they did not have to mourn the deaths of the Escambia County children. But something chilling would soon happen, attracting all the local media. Not long after, the culprits turned themselves into the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, confessing to the murder. The neighborhood residents couldn't believe what was happening, as the children had fled to the home of a convicted sex offender named Ricky Chavis, who at that time provided them with a place to stay. You must be wondering, what connection do the children have with this man? And why did they flee there instead of seeking help from neighbors? Stay tuned and pay close attention to this very peculiar criminal case that will send shivers down your spine. Before we begin the video, I invite you to press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Without further ado, let's get into the video. We are going to Cantonment, Florida, specifically to November 26, 2001. It was a completely normal autumn day until someone called 911 to report that a neighbor's house was on fire. The call was transferred to the fire department, and the Cantonment community firefighters headed to the address of the house in question. It is worth noting that although fires were not common in that area, they were more likely to occur because many of the houses were very old and primarily made of wood, making them extremely flammable. If they caught fire, the flames would spread quickly. Upon arrival, the firefighters found a house in flames. At first, they thought it was just a fire that had consumed the entire house. However, after managing to control the fire, they realized that only part of the house had burned, as the person who called 911 did so in time, allowing for a quick response. While inspecting the place, the firefighters found a body on a recliner sofa. Depending on the source, there is information that the body was not burned and that the fire had not reached that part of the house, while other reports indicate that the body was burned. Despite these discrepancies, authorities determined that the person found on the sofa had died from smoke inhalation. The person on the sofa turned out to be the homeowner, Terry King, who was 40 years old at the time. However, upon further inspection of the body, they discovered that Terry's head was severely battered. This preliminary analysis at the scene led authorities to consider that he had been attacked before the fire started and that he was probably already dead from the head injuries. Subsequently, an autopsy confirmed this suspicion. Terry King had received multiple strong blows to the head, destroying part of his face. The cause of death was head trauma, confirming that he was dead before the fire started. This led authorities to suspect that the fire was set to cover up the murder. Before continuing with the investigation and other details, let's talk a bit about the victim to have some context. As I mentioned earlier, Terry King was 40 years old at the time of the incident. He was a native of Florida, born there on April 17, 1961, to Wilbur Eugene King and Thelma Joyce Robinson. Little is known about his family life and upbringing, but in his adulthood, he met a woman named Janet French while she was working as an exotic dancer in a bar. They began a relationship and had 2 children, Derek in 1988 and Alex in 1989. However, there are reports suggesting that Janet had an extramarital affair and became pregnant with Derek, although Terry accepted raising the child as his own. Regardless of the rumors, Derek and Alex were considered Terry's children. The relationship between Terry and Janet faced a crisis when Janet became pregnant with twins by another man. Despite this, Terry decided to stay and raise the twins as his own. However, the problems did not end there. Janet began using illicit substances and showed signs of depression. In 1994, she left the house, abandoning her 4 children. Janet changed her name to Kelly Marino and would later say that she left because she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising 4 children. Those who knew Terry described him as a kind, responsible man dedicated to his children. He worked tirelessly to support his family, but when left alone with the 4 children, he realized he could not raise them by himself. In 1995, the twins were given up for adoption. Derek was taken in by the family of Frank Lay, the principal of Page High School, and Alex went into state care before being taken in by a family. The children's upbringing was unstable, marked by the abandonment of their mother and then their father, who placed them in foster care due to economic and personal problems. In 2001, Alex returned to live with his father. Although it is unclear, it seems that Terry hoped to eventually provide a better life for his children. That same year, Frank Lay's family contacted Terry, concerned about Derek's behavior. At 13, Derek had begun using illicit substances, alcohol, and had a dangerous fascination with fire. Unable to manage his behavior, they sent him back to live with his father. Living together became difficult when Derek arrived at the house, as he disliked his father's strict rules and preferred living away from the city. Terry's house, besides being in a rural area, sometimes lacked electricity. Derek, diagnosed with ADHD, stopped taking his medication under Terry's supervision, who believed that good education and discipline were sufficient. Terry also imposed new rules, such as taking away violent music and limiting access to television. These rules also affected Alex, creating tensions within the family. Let's continue from the moment Terry's body was found. Detective John Sanderson was assigned to work on the case. He began by questioning potential witnesses, who were the neighbors of the house. The neighbors mentioned that Terry had 2 sons, stating that one had moved in with him some time ago, and then the other. Some knew they were his sons, others did not, but overall, everyone had the impression that Terry was living with 2 lads, Alex and Derek. However, at that moment, neither of them was at the house, and no one knew their whereabouts. It's worth noting that recently, the boys had returned home after being missing for 10 days. Having run away, their father had been desperately searching for them, and some neighbors knew he had reported them missing to the police. But although they had come back home at the time of the fire, they weren't there, and no one knew their whereabouts. Neighbors also discussed Terry's relationship with his children, describing him as a present but strict father. During these conversations, the name of Terry's friend and neighbor, Ricky Chavis, repeatedly came up. Detectives, upon hearing this name several times, decided to speak with him. Neighbors knew that Terry and Ricky were close friends. Terry trusted Ricky and allowed the children to spend time at his house when he was at work. Detectives indeed spoke with Rick, who confirmed his friendship with Terry. However, he claimed not to know where the children were. He mentioned that the boys had run away days earlier, but had no idea of their current whereabouts. Ricky also described Terry as a father concerned for his children, albeit strict. He said it was normal for the children to spend time at his house when Terry had to work. The police realized Ricky was part of Terry's inner circle, trusted to look after his children. So let's find out who this guy is. So they began investigating to find out who Ricky Chavis was, and the investigation revealed the following. Terry and Ricky had been friends for a while, but the police discovered that Ricky had a criminal record. And why did he have a criminal record? It turns out that in 1984, he faced charges of sexually abusing 2 children and was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 5 years of probation. Furthermore, in 1986, while still on probation, he was convicted of robbery and served 3 years in prison. It's unknown if Terry was aware of any of this. However, given Terry's attitude towards his children, almost everyone doubts he would have trusted Ricky if he had known about his history of abuse. It's likely Terry was unaware of Ricky's past. So, who exactly is this man, Ricky Chavis? What is the relationship between Rick, Terry, and the children? Ricky was a neighbor and friend of Terry. They met at a local flea market and apparently had much in common. Information about Rick's personal life is limited, but it's known he came from a dysfunctional home, spending time in foster care and with different families. When Terry needed to run errands or go to work and couldn't take the children, he would leave them with Rick. While at Terry's house, Alex and Derek had a million rules they had to follow. At Rick's house, they had the freedom to do basically whatever they wanted. In Rick's home, the children had access to television, video games, and could do as they pleased, things they couldn't do at their father's house. The relationship became so close, and Terry trusted Ricky with his children so much that sometimes Ricky would do Terry the favor of picking the kids up from school, and they would stay at Rick's house, which felt like a paradise without rules to them. However, in the days leading up to Terry's death, something changed in Terry and Ricky's relationship, and in Terry's permissiveness in leaving the children with Ricky. Terry stopped allowing the children to spend time with Ricky, ceased allowing Ricky to pick them up from school, and they didn't spend as much time at his house. Although no one knew exactly what had happened, it was clear that there had been a change. It's worth noting that by that time, the boys had only been living with their father for a few months, as all of this occurred in 2001. So after they could no longer spend time at Rick's house, where they felt more comfortable and free, and had to return to living under their father's strict rules all the time, the boys ran away from home on November 16, 2001, 10 days before their father's death. On the 27th of November, a day after Terry King's death, Ricky Chavis presented himself at the police station with Alex and Derek King, aged 12 and 13 respectively. Ricky identified himself as a family friend and explained that he had found the children in Santa Rosa, a nearby locality. This raised suspicions, as the police already had certain doubts about Terry's death. After initial questioning of Alex and Derek, it became apparent that they were dealing with a case of patricide. The boys confessed to killing their father and explained that they had then hidden in the woods. During the investigation, it was discovered that Terry suffered from narcolepsy, a sleep disorder causing frequent daytime sleepiness and difficulty staying awake. Alex and Derek were formally charged with first-degree murder and detained in a juvenile facility pending trial. During their confessions, Alex revealed that he had an intimate relationship with Ricky Chavis. Police investigated and found letters in Ricky and Terry's homes where Alex expressed his love and described how Ricky had changed his life. Despite Ricky denying any involvement in Terry's death, evidence of his relationship with Alex led to his arrest. He was charged with first-degree murder, premeditated arson, tampering with evidence, and assaulting a minor. Bail was set at $50,000, which he could not pay, so he remained in custody until trial. Ricky Chavis's trial was decided to proceed before Alex and Derek's, as the brothers had not agreed to testify against him. Both trials were held, and verdicts were reached in each case. In April 2002, the brothers testified against Ricky Chavis, and this is where their initial confession drastically changed. During this trial, both stated that it was Chavis who had killed their father. They claimed that Ricky brutally beat their father and that they had agreed to take the blame themselves to protect Ricky. The reason for this was that, being minors, they would face a much lesser sentence, whereas Ricky could face life imprisonment. During the trial, Ricky's lawyers questioned Alex about why he was changing his initial story. Alex responded that they were afraid of being found guilty of first-degree murder and spending life in prison. Testimonies were heard from people who knew the King family, including teachers and foster families. Mr. Franklin, the school principal where Derek had attended, testified about the violence he had witnessed in Derek.
As you notice from the King case, there's a person can be guilty as a principal and a perpetrator. And I felt that there may have been enough evidence to pursue Chavis as a principal, but the judge ruled that the evidence was insufficient on that point, and I respected that ruling. And so that's why I made the argument that I did, that I'm leaving it up to the jury to decide. I mean, the King boys said he was the perpetrator, and it's up to the jury whether or not they wanted to believe them.
Another key witness was the brother's grandfather, who recounted how Ricky had called him to inform him of the fire and Terry's death. In the trial, Alex's testimony was detailed and revealing. At 13 years old at the time, Alex explained the nature of his relationship with Ricky, revealing that Ricky had told him that they could only live together if Terry died. Alex testified that Ricky had given them specific instructions on the night of the murder. They were to leave the house and hide in Ricky's car trunk, after which Ricky set fire to the house and killed Terry. Alex also stated that he was in love with Ricky and would do anything for him, detailing their relationship, investigators had evidence supporting the existence of this relationship. The prosecution presented further evidence that 10 days before the murder, the brothers had stayed with Ricky, enjoying the freedom and comforts of his home, which included television, music, video games, and age-inappropriate material. Alex explained that Ricky had told them they needed to get rid of Terry to live with him. Ricky, on his part, testified that he had nothing to do with Terry's death, but admitted that Alex had called him after the crime seeking help. Ricky claimed he only picked up the children, washed their bloodied clothes, and hid Alex and Derek in his house. Derek, who was 14 years old at the time, gave a vague statement in court, saying he didn't remember anything and that he and Alex had agreed to take the blame to protect Ricky. The judge, seeing inconsistencies in the confessions and evidence, ordered the prosecution and defense to come to an agreement. On November 14, 2002, the King brothers reaffirmed their initial statement, accepting responsibility for the first-degree murder of their father and admitting that they had lied in Ricky's trial. During the process, they underwent psychological evaluations, which found that Derek exhibited traits of psychopathy. The motive for the murder was to avoid punishment for running away. Ultimately, the brothers were convicted of second-degree murder and premeditated arson. Alex received a 7-year sentence, and Derek received 8 years. They received lesser sentences for pleading guilty and being minors. Ricky Chavis was acquitted of murder and sexual abuse charges due to insufficient evidence. However, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison, 5 years for illegally harboring Alex and Derek, and 30 years as an accomplice to murder and for manipulating evidence. The boys' mother, Kelly, expressed regret for abandoning them, stating she had tried to be a good mother. Prosecutor David Rimmer asserted that Kelly bore a significant responsibility for what had transpired. While in prison, the King brothers received visits from journalists and other personalities. One of the journalists who visited them several times was Catherine Medico. She believed the brothers could rehabilitate, and upon their release from prison, she welcomed them into her home and supported them through psychological therapy and the process of reintegrating into society. Currently, Derek lives in Florida. Alex, however, was arrested in 2011 for violating his probation and fleeing a traffic accident. He was incarcerated again and released in December 2013. After his release, he developed an interest in technology. He later had a girlfriend and lived with her in California before moving to Texas, where he currently resides. Interestingly, he moved to the same area where his brother Derek had lived for a time, before permanently moving to Florida. After leaving prison, Derek lived on a ranch called Estrella Vista in Texas. This ranch was created by a man named Dan Daly, with the purpose of providing a new beginning for individuals who had committed patricide. Daly aimed to serve as a father figure for those who no longer had parents due to their actions. It's a unique concept, and Daly also founded an organization called the Redemption Project. Through this organization, legal representation and financial support were provided to young people accused of patricide. While Derek and Alex were in prison, Dan Daly started sending them letters, and thus began regular communication. Derek decided that upon leaving prison, he would move to Estrella Vista in Texas because it was the only place that would take him. After spending time with Catherine Medico, Derek moved to Estrella Vista, where he lived for approximately 6 months before relocating to Jacksonville, Florida in 2013. He currently resides there, although there are reports that he was sent to prison for abusing his stepson and released in 2021. On the other hand, Alex also moved to Estrella Vista in Texas and managed to reunite with his mother, as per his uncle, Greg King. Alex passed away on Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024. This is the case of Terry King. Despite the available information, there are many details that seem confusing and strange, especially in the way the trials were handled. It is a complex case full of questions. By the way, I forgot to tell you that we mentioned Catherine Medico. She wrote a book about the King family case. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel to see more similar videos and activate the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you when we upload a new video. Till next time.